Hey, folks, has this ever happened to you? How did I get here? I'm filming men with swastika tattoos wrestling in diapers. What events in my life led me to this point? How hard did my parents fail that I'm palling around with some of the biggest racists on the planet? These guys say and do some really messed up, over the line stuff. Well, guess I need to find a way to top them. If so, first of all, screw you. And second of all, your name might be Matt Walsh. MAGA heads are in a bit of a difficult spot right now. Turns out that the sexual predator they've been worshipping for the last decade was a sexual predator this entire time. If only there had been signs that the guy who perved on Miss Teen USA contestants and compared his taste in young women to Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile. Though maybe it's unfair of me to lump Matt, let me make this perfectly clear. I will never vote for Donald Trump Walsh in with the rest of his fascist ilk. He knew that Trump was likely a predator as far back as February of 2016, writing of Trump's supporters in a Blaze blog post, "Your esteem for him only grows when he calls for the assassination of women and children, says he'd like to have sex with his daughter, brags about his adultery, etc. You're excited by the most vile statements and most cretinous behavior imaginable, no matter how many times he publicly ogles his own children, because, you say, it's politically incorrect." In response to calls for him to vote for our predator-in-chief, Walsh said, "The answer is no. Also, hell no. Also, how dare you even ask me that? Trump is a con man, a creep, a fascist with a spray tan, a reality TV Mussolini, etc. How could I possibly unite around this man who I've spent months correctly observing the fact that he's a scam artist who lies about everything?" Back in them good old days, Walsh was adamant that no matter what his party did, he would never vote for a man who publicly sexualizes his own children, an issue Matt claims is very important to him. Even if the party foolishly selected Donald Trump as its nominee and he was running against Hillary Clinton, Walsh would absolutely not align himself again with a man who sexualizes his own children. Not sure why I keep repeating that. I wonder if it's relevant somehow.
And even if I'm worried that, like, I don't know if this guy's for real or not, I don't know if he's actually a conservative, but he's certainly better than Hillary Clinton, who's like evil incarnate.
Not even if he's running against Hillary Clinton, not even if he gives me $1,000,000. The belief underlying each and every one of these old blog posts and public statements is that Donald Trump was such a clown candidate in 2016 that there was absolutely no chance he would actually win the nomination, much less the election. Walsh was able to be a never-Trumper because the odds seemed in favor of that position coming out on top in the end. And then something incredible happened. The party actually did select Donald Trump as its nominee, and Matty changed on a dime. See, Matt Walsh is an obedient little lapdog. All his existing beliefs, and to be clear, I do think he has some beliefs, are superseded by power. He's like those aliens in Doctor Who, you know, the ones that willingly submit to whoever has conquered them that week.
I take it from the pathological compulsion to surrender. You're from Tivoli.
Yes, the most invaded planet in the galaxy. Our anthem is called Glory to... insert name here.
In a 2024 interview, Matt described his journey on Donald Trump. I showed you a clip from that interview already. During this discussion, the central thesis is this. In 2016, he thought that Donald Trump was a secret leftist. But as it turns out, he's actually super right-wing, so now Matt supports him. Curiously, he never once makes mention of the fact that, again, Donald Trump sexualizes his own children in public. You know, that thing he kept complaining about before Trump conquered him and demanded his submission, that teensy little issue that any honest person would need some serious justification to look past. And lest you think the Doctor Who comparison was a bit unfair, here are Matt's exact words.
So for me, it was really after the primaries were over back in 2016 that the whole Never Trump thing was irrelevant. I mean, he won, he won, and now he's against Hillary Clinton. We certainly don't want Hillary Clinton to win.
Not even if he's running against Hillary Clinton, not even if he gives me $1,000,000.
So, okay, that leaves Matt in a difficult position now, doesn't it? The similarly weak-willed sociopath who conquered and domed him 9 years ago, sorry for giving you that visual, is probably on his way out. Unlike every previous scandal, Trump is probably not going to be able to shake off being directly implicated in child sex trafficking again. Note that I said probably, though. That's an important word here. Matt Walsh has two main options now. Hitch himself to Trump, 100%, go down with a likely sinking ship but go down swinging, or stand on what principles he pretends to have and publicly rebuke the predator whose feet he kisses every morning. Again, Sorry for the visual. But I think Matt has learned from last time. Taking any sort of confident stance at this moment would be a very bad idea. The MAGA movement is up in the air and there's no telling where it'll land, so instead, Matthew has decided to hedge his bets. Maybe Trump's political career is over, God willing, and let's just say that J.D. Vance isn't picking up the reins anytime soon, but maybe Donald Trump pulls some strings and has his name scrubbed from thousands of documents and gets to play the victim. In either case, Matty needs to come out on top. First of all, not one of the more than 40 videos he's uploaded in the last 2 weeks have been about the Epstein kerfuffle, an interesting creative choice if I do say so myself, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't offered any criticism of Dear Leader. In an uploaded segment titled Why I Will Always Be America First and America Only, Matt does just this in a roundabout way. We'll listen to some of that segment in a moment, but I'll give you a basic summary here. Matt claims that it is not a surprising or extreme position to believe in American chauvinism, which he describes as the belief that we should only care about American lives and absolutely nobody else, rather than the America First ideology, which advocates for pretending to take care of Americans before extending a hand to the suffering and poor outside our borders. America Only advocates for not giving a fuck about human beings if they're not born on specific dirt. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Like I said before, Matt Walsh is a desperate lapdog, which means every moment of his online presence must be a performance of his conformity to conservative and masculine aesthetics. You see this in the fake hunting lodge set with a mounted fish I'm sure Matt caught himself, and the wood fireplace that never seems to flicker. You can also see this with the lazy film filter they put over this video that repeats every second and a half or so. It's here to make Walsh feel classic and old-timey, but much like this set that honestly I'm not convinced isn't just a flat, comes off exactly as it is. Hollow bullshit. Maintaining course, Walsh's video is largely a response to other conservatives who unsurprisingly find his views on this subject distasteful.
So for example, here was the response from a lawyer named Ethan Isaacson, who describes himself as pro-Western civilization. And here's what he told me, quote, "The problem with America Only is that America still exists in the world and has to have relations with other nations. Some will be adversaries and others alliances. Ignoring the rest of the world doesn't make the world go away."
Not for nothing, it's worth noting that Walsh didn't read that last line out loud. He obviously wasn't condensing for time, he just didn't seem to find it important to emphasize the part that might make his audience a little more sympathetic to this person.
There are many posts along these lines, and of course the problem is that nothing that he wrote is actually responsive to what I said. I never denied that other nations exist. If Cuba develops a nuclear bomb and tries to detonate it on American soil tomorrow, I would support military action to stop them. On the other hand, if Cuba has some kind of humanitarian crisis, which they often do, then we generally should not intervene because it has no bearing on the United States. It would not make us stronger in any way to send them billions of dollars. Quite the contrary. So we shouldn't do it, usually. And that's the point I was making. You know, the only country that should matter to our leaders is America. America only. America is the only concern.
And here it is in its purest form, that hedging I was talking to you about. What Matt has done here is almost clever. America Only is a direct, critical response to Trump's alleged America First policy. If being outed as a child trafficker rightfully ends his political career, the former MAGA cult will have a new, adjacent slogan to rally around, something that'll allow them to pretend they always knew Trump was bad. In essence, Matt has given them a way to say, we never actually liked Trump, we just thought America First was better than woke DEI transgenderism. Just like that, they have an excuse to pretend they never worshipped at the altar of Jeffrey Epstein. Actually, Trump was woke this whole time. America First? That's pussy shit. We're the fuck everyone who isn't us party. Leopards are eating faces like never before, and it feels fucking great. But what if it turns out that the Epstein files are riddled with 11 character redactions? I mean, we can't just abandon our guy, right? Trump built this movement, and by all accounts, he turned out to be a great guy as long as you ignore all of the stuff he says and does. Well, in that case, we've just hand-delivered him a new rallying cry that's just close enough to his old one while dragging the Overton window just a smidge further to the right. America Only is a perfect slogan for snakes like Matt because it is simultaneously a pro and anti-Trump statement. Something Schrodinger's asshole. But I would feel this video was incomplete without addressing the contents of what Matt said in the first place, because America Only is predicated on a lie. He gives a specific example: if Cuba were developing nuclear missiles to fire at the US, we ought to intervene, but if Cuba were suffering a humanitarian crisis, we ought to stay out of that bullshit because helping the needy does not make us stronger. Many a statement could be made about how deeply this flies in the face of the Christian religion Matt pretends to practice, how any interpretation of Christianity with any real legs proclaims everyone on earth to be children of God, that while the Bible is a little bit more into nations and borders than I am personally, the foreigner is your sibling in Christ and is to be treated as such. For the Christian LARPers in the comments prepared to drop their response memes to the idea that a non-Christian could ever deign to criticize their failures to live up to the standards they pretend to hold, I'm not anti-Christian at all, nor have I ever been. I don't have nothing but contempt for you or your backwards beliefs or however the meme goes. It's not my fault that I'm better at your religion than you. But of course, this is more than just Matt's fake religious convictions. Helping the suffering does make our nation stronger, not just because soft power is important for dealing with those hypothetical Cuba's got a nuke situations, but because the moral character of a nation and of its people is directly tied to the well-being of those people. A lot of parents seem to understand this intuitively in my experience, generally agreeing that they will have failed in raising their child if that child grows up to be cruel, hateful, or indifferent to the suffering of others. A people which proudly ignores the pain of folks on the other side of its magic line is, first and foremost, a people which will find any excuse to ignore the pain of people inside the magic line, but also a people which will never experience nor deserve peace and happiness. This is a common problem that Matt's clan white nationalists face all the time. When your ideology is built upon excluding people from society for their immutable characteristics, the road never ends. The people that ideology draws in will always need something to hate. Congratulations, we've expelled all of the black, Jewish, Indian, Chinese, hell, even those based, trad, Japanese people, but we're still not happy, are we? You know, I've noticed that a couple of the Irish people haven't been putting in their fair share recently. Remind me why we invited them to the ethno-state again? And for the record, if anyone feels the need to comment that that's just what America is like right now, no, not really. Americans frequently turn a blind eye to suffering, pretend it doesn't exist, or even live in blissful ignorance of its existence, and this is bad. It's wrong, and it's one of the fundamental failings of our society, in fact. But what Matt wants is for Americans to look at that suffering directly in the face and still feel nothing. This is palpably worse than how things are now. Matt further gives an admittedly imperfect sports analogy, arguing that countries are a little like football teams. If you're the coach of one team, you would never do anything to help another team at the expense of your own.
Now, I used the analogy last week of teams in sports. Not a perfect analogy, but it helps make the point, you know, that if you're the coach of a football team, you would never do anything to help another team if it hurts your own team. Now, that doesn't mean that you hate other teams or you deny their humanity, doesn't make you a selfish person or a bad Christian. It just means that your duty, your job, is to your team.
And you know what? I'm not a sports person, but neither is Matt, so let's take a crack at just how fucking insane this is. One, I don't know of a time that this has ever happened, but I'd be willing to bet that if one football team started cutting off another team's access to basic human necessities, starving them of food and water and the like, other teams would probably feel the need to get involved. I highly doubt that the Green Bay Packers would gladly play against the Miami Despots, but maybe I'm wrong in that. In real-life sports, at least so far as I can tell, when a player is seriously injured, even if they're of the opposing team, you're expected to try and get them help, even though it doesn't score you any points whatsoever. Frequently, players take a knee when someone is seriously hurt or interrupt plays when they don't have to, which makes sense when you consider that sports are played by human beings who care about other people.
Players from both teams kind of formed this human wall, this shield around what was going on, around what the medical personnel were doing. Players knew that we should not be seeing. They were trying to respect the privacy of their fallen teammate.
After checking with my brother, who is a sports person, I was directed to look into an incident earlier this year in which CJ Stroud suffered a concussion on the field during the Broncos v Texans game a couple of weeks ago. Don't ask me which team he plays for, because I will not know. Either way, Alex Singleton, a player with whom Stroud had previously gotten into a public altercation, immediately signaled for medical attention, breaking football expert Matt Walsh's winning strategy of never helping the opposing team and ending the NFL forever. He also told me to look into the 1992 incident in in which Formula One driver Eric Comis suffered a severe, potentially lethal crash, prompting fellow racer Ayrton Senna to stop in his tracks, sacrificing his own chance of success in order to save Comis's life. I know that that's not football, but it does feel kind of important to remember that there are real human beings in this world who don't think solely in terms of personal power and attainment. Some things just matter more than money and glory. In fairness, though, it is possible Matt thought that sportsmanship was some sort of sick hockey-playing transformer. But even setting aside his butchering of sports logic, this isn't just not a perfect analogy, it's fucking ridiculous. Football, by definition, is a zero-sum game. Winning a football game means someone else necessarily lost. That's not how geopolitics works, you fucking sociopath. Helping out suffering human beings around the world doesn't mean America loses, unless by lose you mean gets into the kingdom of heaven. The Cuba example Walsh gave earlier was not an example of America helping someone else by hurting itself. No American families suffered because we sent hypothetical humanitarian aid. If you wanted to be a dick about it, it's entirely plausible that this humanitarian aid provided Americans jobs, fulfilling jobs at that. Matt has frequently used some version of this argument when discussing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, proudly proclaiming that I don't give a shit what happens in Ukraine, makes no difference to me and never has. Most Americans feel exactly the same way, and it drives these people crazy. He says this, of course, because he's a demon in human skin. But I think that this is a good litmus test for reasons that will become clear shortly.
It's pretty simple. Again, America only means that the only priority of our leaders is to serve the interests of our country and its people. So when you say, oh, but what about this? If we don't do this, it's going to hurt Americans. Okay, well, then we should do it, if your argument is true. Okay, now we're arguing based on the right premise here. That's the whole point. If you're making any argument for doing anything globally, the argument should be, well, yeah, we should do this because this will help America. Now, you might be wrong, you might be right about that argument, but that is the argument you need to make. Making the argument that, well, we should do this because it's really important to those foreigners over there that we do it, that is the wrong argument.
What Matt is communicating here is the idea that morality does not matter to him. What matters is what benefits Americans. This is, of course, a lie, as his entire policy project is centered around increasing American suffering, but I digress. In practice, this means that sometimes helping other nations can be justified, but only if it directly benefits the US. The Russia-Ukraine case is useful for our purposes here because both sides of this coin are true. Helping Ukraine obviously helps the US because appeasing dictators has never worked once in the history of the world, and there will come a time when Putin or whoever replaces him will set his sights on Americans if he's allowed to continue. But even if it didn't, even if working to stop bombs from being dropped on toddlers does not materially affect our GDP, even if it does not prevent a future war that does directly affect us, it's still the right thing to do. In that previous tweet, as he is wont to do, Matt says the quiet part out loud. In his video, he tries to argue that America only does not mean denying non-Americans their humanity, but when discussing Ukraine, he makes it clear that's exactly what it means. He doesn't just think it's impractical for us to get involved, he doesn't give a shit. The lives of children, a cornerstone of his performative activism on the home front, do not matter because they go to sleep under the wrong flag. This comes up in his minimal commentary on Gaza, unsurprisingly, though you can tell that it's kind of difficult for him to talk about. He clearly doesn't want us to be funding Israel because that's a violation of America only, and most of his audience are neo-Nazis, but not only does he work for one of this country's biggest genocide apologists, at least for now, by God, he hates Arabs. You can see it in his eyes. Content warning for the Young Turks.
Israel cannot exist without being propped up by the United States. You think so?
Matt Walsh is, like many conservatives, sitting in the middle of a clusterfuck of their own making. They've turned up the temperature so high that now the only way to maintain attention is by saying and doing increasingly outlandish things. Matt's desperately looking for a new way to distinguish himself in this brief, wild west of conservative politics without upsetting dear leader. The party, especially the young base, find themselves drifting towards neo-Nazism in the form of the Groyper movement, a group which itself is currently trying to play both sides of the MAGA coin right now. Trump says America first, Groypers say America first, so Matt distinguishes himself by saying he's actually further to the right than the open Nazis in his party. He's even more conservative than the conservative groomer podcaster cult, and that's a good thing. somehow. But even so, even as I correctly point out that Matt is trying to position himself as worse than the open neo-Nazis in his coalition, or if you look at his Twitter, ally with them, he's still playing it safe. Donald Trump has always been more or less cool with his ideologically fascist base. He'll put out soft condemnations here or there, mostly in the 2016 to 2018 era, but they're never specific, and they're always easily deniable to those who would be motivated to deny them. He had to say that, they'll often say, but secretly he agrees with us. So Walsh isn't taking any sort of risk there. There is no too far right for Trump. There is only too critical. Marjorie Taylor Greene saw this recently, though I wouldn't be too surprised if she fell back in line one of these days. Actually, as I wrote this, I double-checked her Twitter, and it turns out she is also playing the America-only grift. If there was any doubt that this is just a desperate hedge-betting ploy, I hope that's removed now. Matt is, in essence, a right-wing enlightened centrist. But I repeat myself. Thank you for watching me talk. Like this video, and indeed any other I feel the need to dump on your feed. That will be the only way to stop me from rhyming. Otherwise, subscribe, join the Patreon, or what have you if you feel like you have too much money. And if your name is Matt Walsh, take a break from thinking about the age of consent and consider developing some principles.